Let's first start by looking at the basic concepts of how to get the best results when creating a PhotoVCarve toolpath for your project. Let's start by looking at what PhotoVCarving is. The PhotoVCarve toolpath uses a V-bit tool to etch a picture into the surface of your material. The PhotoVCarve toolpath creates lines of grooves that vary in width and depth to represent the detail in a photo or an image. The quality of the finished result is very dependent upon the high level of contrast between the material surface and the machine grooves, which is very important to remember when cutting designs with this toolpath strategy. The PhotoVCarve toolpath machines dark areas in the photograph with wide grooves, and the lighter areas have narrower grooves. The software automatically calculates the toolpaths based on the cutter selected and the maximum depth of groove required. A good PhotoVCarve result is quite an art form, and the ideal settings change depending on your tool bit, the wood type and color, the photo itself, and the accuracy of your CNC machine. So let's take a look at some practical tips on creating a really good PhotoVCarve. The material you carve must be flat, otherwise the grooves will not be machined at the correct depth relative to its surface. So it's a good idea to surface your wood. Since the V groove is so sensitive to changes in the material height, it's always good to first do a thin pocket cut over the whole piece of wood to make sure it's perfectly perpendicular to your cutting bit. The table or bed of the machine must also be flat, and we recommend that it is skimmed flat or a sacrificial board is stuck onto the table surface and then skimmed flat. Sharp bits are important, as a blunt bit will cause more wood to come out with a furry texture. This goes for just about any CNC carving, of course. Use a wood that does not have a strong grain. A strong grain can confuse the final result and make it hard to see your carved detail. Tighter grains prove much better results. Preparing and finishing a PhotoVCarve machine design is critical to how the finished piece will look. As you can see from the image, a high degree of contrast between the material surface and the machine grooves is essential, otherwise the effect will not be very prominent or visible. Sealing the wood post-cut using a varnish or a lacquer will help ensure that your paint doesn't bleed into the grain, as well as making it easy to remove that excess paint. Once your seal is dry, simply apply a dark stain or paint and wipe the excess off the surface. This will leave dark grooves, and that contrast with the material surface will bring your design to life. Alternately, you could also carve your design detail directly into a material, paint, or spray the complete job with a contrasting color, and then use a sanding machine to clean off the top surface, leaving the grooves dark. For more information on practical tips for creating a good PhotoVCarve items, take a look at the PhotoVCarve section of the Vectric forum. So now let's take a look at how the PhotoVCarve toolpath works in your software. As you can see, I've already gone ahead and opened up a file into our software, and this file is called PhotoVCarve Strategy Sample, and it's available in your Tutorials folder. So you can go ahead and open that up if you'd like to and follow along. First thing we're going to look at is your actual job setup. So we're going to go here to our job setup form. We'll click that, and you'll see that's a single-sided job. The width is 10, the height is 7, the thickness is 1, and we're using inches as our units. We're zeroing off our material surface, and for this sort of a job, that is best practice when you're doing anything with V-carving, is to actually zero off the surface that you're going to be applying your V-carving toolpath to, or in this case, your PhotoVCarving toolpath. Our datum is set to the bottom left. We're going to be using a very high resolution. If you notice that your computer struggles with that, then you can go ahead and reduce that if you'd like to. We're going to choose a material, and this material today is going to be the Canadian maple material. And we can go ahead and click OK. Now for now, we're just going to go ahead and hide all these extra sheets, and we'll get to those in a little bit. Go back up to our design, tab again, and we're going to press F on our keyboard to fit all of this to our screen. Now the first thing we're going to need for a PhotoVCarve is of course a photo. So let's go over to our Import Bitmap or Vectors tool here under File Operations. And again, inside of your tutorial folder, you're going to find a JPEG called Happy Couple. So we'll select that and click Open. That'll open up directly into the center of my job. And then I can go ahead now and size this up. So I'm going to go over to my Set Selected Object Size. And we're going to keep our link our X and Y together. And we're just going to change our height of this to be 6 inches. And we'll click Apply. And that's perfect. So we just close that down. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to jump over to our Toolpaths tab and have a look at the actual PhotoVCarve Toolpath strategy. And as always, the first thing we're going to do is take a look at our material setup. Just going to verify that the material that we have on our machine is exactly what the software thinks that we have. So we can verify the thickness of our material, and for us, we're just going to assume it's still 1 inch. Our datum is going to be set to the bottom left-hand corner. We're zeroing off our material surface. We're going to make sure that anything that we cut is right on the very top of our material, unless we tell it any different. And then we're going to make sure our rapid Z gaps above our material for our clearance and our plunge are safe and appropriate for our machine. And the same thing with our home and start position. And then we can just go ahead and click OK. Now let's take a look at the PhotoVCarve Toolpath strategy right here under our Toolpath operations. So let's go ahead and work our way down through this form from the top to bottom and talk about all of these features. So first of all, we can go ahead and choose a start depth. And this start depth will tell the software at what point we'd like to actually cut our PhotoVCarving toolpath. In most cases, you're going to set this at 0 or at the top of your material, but we give you this option just in case maybe you decided that you've pocketed out a part of the material and you'd like to put this PhotoVCarve toolpath in the base of that, then you can go ahead and change that start depth to reflect that result. The next is your maximum carving depth. Now this number here, the software will take that and use that to decide what the maximum depth it will plunge your tool into your material. The deeper you go, the less lines we can get into your PhotoVCarve toolpath depending on your actual bit that you're going to choose to cut your PhotoVCarve toolpath with. So this is one of those numbers that you can play around with a little bit to get a better result if things aren't looking exactly like you expect or like you'd like it to have it look in the end. The step over retract, well, at the end of each line that your V-bit or your cutter will cut, your tool will be retracted out of your material. This number tells the software in your machine how far out of the material you'd like it to go. Of course, a smaller number will save you time, but you're going to need to make sure that this number is safe and appropriate for the material and your machine. Okay. The next area, you can go ahead and choose the tool that you're going to use to cut your PhotoVCarve toolpath with, and you can choose any of your V-bits from your tool database. In this case, or our first example, we're going to go ahead and use this 60-degree V-bit, so we're going to select that. This next section, we can go ahead now and further define how we want this PhotoVCarve toolpath to look. So we can use a raster option to cut our actual photo. We can use a hatch. We can use selected vectors. But for this first example, we're just going to go back up to raster. We can tell the software how dense we would like our line spacing to be. Right now, we're going to leave it at super dense. We can also tell it at what angle we'd like to cut our PhotoVCarve toolpath at. So this will also affect the way your finished cut may look in your material based on what material it is, maybe the grain of your wood, maybe how you decided that you're going to want to finish this. So it's one of those things that you can go ahead and play around with until you get, again, the result that you would like. In this section, we can tell the software to go ahead and project the resulting toolpath onto a 3D component or your composite model. So for right now, let's just go ahead and calculate these set of settings, and we'll see what we get. You'll see that we're automatically flipped over to our 3D view. You can see the blue wireframe of our toolpath, and we can go ahead and preview the visible toolpath. That looks pretty good right there, but I think we might get a better result if we go ahead and change the color of this actual toolpath to reflect more what we might end up having in the end. So we're just going to go ahead and color this just a little bit darker, and you'll see that now that really pops off there, so I can really get a good sense of how this is going to look. Let's go ahead and reset our preview and go back into our PhotoVCarve toolpath and make a few changes. The first thing we're going to look at is we're going to go ahead and change the actual V-bit that we're using here. So we're going to select a different tool from our tool database. In this case, it's going to be the 90-degree V-bit, and we'll select that. And we'll just recalculate as everything is here. And you'll notice right away that the line spacing is much more than it was before with a 60-degree tool, and that's because the geometry of the tool has changed. So we can go ahead and preview that visible toolpath and we'll see the difference. It's a much bolder result, less lines, maybe not exactly what you're looking for. So again, let's reset our preview. Let's go back into our PhotoVCarve toolpath, and let's go up and have a look at our maximum carving depth. Let's just change that to be a lot less. So let's change that to be 0.02, and let's recalculate that. And you'll see now what we've done is we actually get more lines because we're not telling the tool to go in as deep as we did before. So now we can preview this visible toolpath, and that looks really nice. The issues that you might run into here is that depending on the material you're cutting into, maybe a pre-finish that you've put onto it, how smooth your material is, this may not cut as well as what you'd expect because you're not going in nearly as deep as maybe you need to. Just some things to keep in mind. So let's go ahead and reset that preview. Let's go back into our PhotoVCarve toolpath again. Let's change this back to be 0.05. And we're going to go ahead and go back to that 60-degree V-bit. We'll select that. The next thing we're going to look at is the line spacing at the bottom here. So if we go ahead and calculate that, you'll see that our line spacing looks pretty good. Let's go back into our tool for a second. And let's just make it a little bit less dense. So we can recalculate that. And you'll see that we've spaced the tool out a little bit more. Again, the result of that may not be what you expect. So let's go back in here again, and we'll go back all the way down to dense. The next thing we want to look at is the line angle. So right now we've looked at a 0-degree angle, so it's just going to cut back and forth. But you might find it a bit more pleasing if you put in like 45 degrees, and then we recalculate that, and then we preview that visible toolpath. And to me, that looks even better. It gives it a bit more of an artistic flair, and it looks quite nice, I think, in the end. So let's just go ahead and reset that again and close this down and go back into our toolpath again. And so we've gone over pretty much everything that's in this form right now that we can with this particular sheet. The next thing we want to look at is the selected vectors option. So let's close this down. Let's go back to our 2D view just for a minute. We're going to go to our sheets up here at the top, and we're going to turn on the hearts sheet, and we'll go ahead and move over to that one just by double clicking on it. And we can select that and then zoom out. And you'll see that we can see both sheets there. This one we were just working at, and this is the new one that we've just made visible. Okay, there we go. So what you'll see right off the bat is that we have the same photo that we used before in our last example, and then we have a vector heart drawn in the 2D view here. Now this vector heart has come from your free clip art that you can download with your software, so I've just gone ahead and brought that in and sized it up appropriately. And if I go up here to my layers and I go ahead and turn on my hearts layer, you'll see that I've also taken that heart and offsetted it outwards a whole bunch of times to generate this kind of a pattern here that we're going to use to create a unique design with our PhotoVCarve toolpath. I've also gone ahead and added in some love text here in the center of that heart. So let's go back to our PhotoVCarve toolpath again. And we're going to go ahead and select the selected vectors option. And as soon as we do that, you'll see that our line spacing is grayed out, and so is our line angle. That's because we're going to use these vectors to actually inform the software about these things here. So the spacing between our lines, and because there's no line angle because we're using this nice sort of heart shape, then we don't need to worry about that. So all I need to do now is just go ahead and select all of the vectors that we have here. So I'm going to marquee select everything, and then I'm going to go in and holding down my shift key, I'm going to deselect the love text, and then we're going to go ahead and calculate that toolpath. I also still have the bitmap selected. And you'll see now that if we preview that visible toolpath, you'll see we get this really nice effect. And again, we can go ahead and give that toolpath a color. That looks really quite nice. And if I go back to my 2D view just for a second, I can go ahead and select this love text, close this down, and create a really quick VCarve toolpath. We'll just calculate that, and we can preview that. And you see that now we've got a nice looking finished and a very unique design for our PhotoVCarve toolpath. So let's go ahead and take a look at some other options that we have in the software to edit the bitmap before you go ahead and create your PhotoVCarve toolpath. And for that, we're going to go up to our sheets, and we're going to go ahead and turn on our oval sheet, and we'll go over to that sheet. We'll go to our 2D view, we'll zoom out, and we'll see again, we have all of our 3 sheets are all there for us to look at, but this is the one that we're going to be focusing in on for this part of the demo. let's close down our Preview Toolpath dialog and let's jump back over to our Design tab for a moment, and we're going to select our bitmap. Now, built into our software, we have our picture editor. So if we select that, we can go ahead and make some very basic edits to bitmaps that we've imported into our software. In this case, it might be important that you have these features available to you, especially if you need to adjust the brightness or the contrast or the gamma of your photo to make sure that your PhotoVCarve toolpath looks as nice as it can. So you can use these sliders here, of course, to go ahead and adjust your contrast if you'd like to. We can go ahead and use the brightness here to change the brightness if we want to. You can go ahead and use this to change the gamma if you would like to. You can invert your photo if you want to. You can go ahead and convert it into a grayscale if that's helpful. But the feature we want to look at right now, and most importantly for this part of the demo, is this part here where we can add a border. So let's go ahead and turn that on. Now right away you'll see that the software has gone ahead and added a rectangular border to our photo, and we can go ahead and adjust the width to be what we'd like it to be or whatever looks pleasing to us. We've got the option of an oval border, which to me looks really quite nice. So we can go ahead and just adjust that just slightly, and then we can click apply, close this down, choose that bitmap, jump back over to our Toolpath tab again, reopen up our PhotoVCarve Toolpath strategy, go ahead and choose maybe a hatch for this. We can go ahead and recalculate that toolpath, preview it, and you'll see what happens now. We get a nice feathered edge around the outside of our oval, which actually is quite pleasing for this. You don't have those hard corners that we saw a minute ago in our rectangular version. I think that looks really nice. Now let's take that one step further, and we can go ahead and crop our bitmap to only have the couple in the photo. To do that, we're going to go over to another sheet that we have set up here called Bitmap Crop. Let's just double click on that. Again, we can close down our Preview Toolpath dialog, go to our 2D view, and we can have a look and see what we have here. So I've already done a little bit of the work for us. I've gone ahead and created an outline around our couple using our freehand drawing tool. So I'm going to use that particular outline to crop our bitmap, and then we have some nice text here at the bottom that we can add in to create a really nice looking plaque for a 10th anniversary. So let's jump back over to our Design tab again, and we're going to go to our Crop Bitmap tool. So with those vectors selected, I can hold down my Shift key and I can grab the bitmap and I can crop that bitmap, and you'll see that now I'm just left with the couple. Slide that over here out of the way. And I can grab this text and I can go ahead and just size that down a little bit, move it into my space up here. And that looks pretty good. Let's jump back over to our PhotoVCarve Toolpath strategy again. And with that, we'll go ahead and we'll select the couple, the cropped picture. We'll just go ahead and do maybe a raster of that. We'll calculate that. We'll preview that visible toolpath. Again, we're going to color that in with a color. That looks really quite nice. Let's go back to our 2D view, or in this case, if we want to, we can just go ahead and show our vectors in our 3D view. So let's close this down. Let's go ahead and select the anniversary text here. Add a bit of a V-carving toolpath to it. We'll just use all the settings that are here. We'll calculate that. We'll preview that visible toolpath. Again, we might want to give that a bit of a color. That looks really good. And I'm really happy with that. The only thing I might want to add to it is a nice little profile cut around the outside of this to really make that picture pop. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and close this down, the Preview Toolpath dialog, and then we are going to go ahead and just click into the white space here, and we'll select those vectors that we used to crop the bitmap with in the 3D view. And we're going to go to our profile toolpath. In this case, we're just going to cut down just a very little bit, not too deep, but maybe 0.3 of an inch. We're going to use a 60-degree V-bit in this profile toolpath, which is a nice use of a V-bit. And we're just going to leave everything else the way it is, and we're going to calculate that. Then we'll preview our visible toolpath. We'll give that a color. And yeah, that looks really nice. It gives it a nice sort of outline around it, a little bit of definition. I really like that in the end. I think it's a nice looking finished design. And with that, we've pretty much touched on every option that you have available to you in the PhotoVCarve toolpath.